Welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. Each week, we hear real time stories from athletes and CEOs on how to maximize performance through an endurance mindset. Let's get started. Well, welcome to the Chief Endurance Officer Podcast. I'm your host, Greg McDonough. I am extremely excited about our guest today. She is an experienced executive with board level advisor, passion for inspiring the next generation of board members. She is an impressive Ironman finisher, founder, CEO of the Boardroom company, co-founder and board chair of her C-suite, president of the British American Business Council in Chicago. Please welcome Naomi Kent. Naomi, it's great to have you on the show.
Hey, thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And as you know, we love talking about endurance and especially the endurance mindset. So, Naomi, how has your endurance mindset impacted your life unexpectedly?
Yeah, I think if I'll tell a little story here, and I'm sure we all have a little bit of a story about how we got into this, and I don't think all of us, have necessarily been born endurance athletes. I think a lot of us become that way, and I say my parents were definitely quite disciplined. They were very active, so I was around that from a very early age. But then at age 11, I went to boarding school, and it was like a full-time boarding school. My parents moved abroad. And this was in the UK where I'm from. And one of the teachers there actually saw me running, and she said, "You're actually a pretty good runner. You should do this more often." And I was like, "Okay, well, when do I do that? We have school and everything else." And she said, "Well, just do it early in the morning. Wake up early and go run." So I did, and that kind of got me on the path of doing early morning workouts, getting those over and done with, which even still today I do. I was actually out this morning. I'm in Chicago at the moment. I went to see the sunrise at the lake. It's beautiful out there. I do recommend anyone, if you're ever in Chicago, go down to the lake in the morning. It's stunning, and I ran I think 4 or 5 miles, but that early morning, getting that workout in early sets you up for the day. It helps you feel like you've achieved something before anyone has even sort of got out of bed. And so the mindset for me is all about a daily routine. It's about discipline. But I think there are certainly people along the way who kind of inspired me, right, to be more active and to do it on a frequent basis, not just once a year you do a marathon, but actually something that you do and you run or you train, all year round.
I love it. So, how do you see that routine, that consistency show up in other parts of your life?
Yeah, it's funny because I talk about I went to boarding school, so you probably think that I'm really tidy and organized and everything else, and I wasn't. So this was a little bit of a shock to the system. Boarding schools aren't all very strict, but certainly there are a lot of rules and regulations, and I like to break the rules. So it was good for me to have that balance actually, and so if I think back to why I was doing it and what I was doing it for, it was certainly about being healthy, feeling good. And I think there's also, and I think we all have this, endurance athletes all have a little voice in their head that says, you don't have to wake up tomorrow morning. It's cold out. You can stay in bed, right? Or you can take the bus home. You don't have to run. And we kind of fight through that. And it's because I think we all enjoy the feeling of achievement and achieving something. And so when you think about how sports and activities and endurance and all of these races kind of come into play with your regular kind of life and in business, you have to always feel like you're winning. I feel like there needs to be a little bit of your kind of personality every day. You have to feel like a winner. And if you feel like a winner because you ran 3 miles in the morning before anyone else woke up, I think that's good. And it sets you up for a confident day. It sets you up for a good day versus saying, oh, I've had a terrible morning. The bus was late, the train was late. Something happened to the dog, something's going on with my kids or whatever it might be. At least you feel like you're like a little step ahead, even if there are other things that life throws at you. So I think it's that little piece of achievement that we all want, and that we all strive to get.
So, taking that one step further, do you incorporate running in other aspects of your day? If you're running and you come up to a stumbling block, or you're just feeling not so hot in the afternoon, or something goes the wrong way, will you kind of stop what you're doing and pull out your running shoes and say, you know what, I'm going to break through this by doing a little bit of exercise?
Yeah, that's interesting. I don't know. It's definitely part of sort of a almost like a meditation, right? It's almost like a
Mhm.
time when you can kind of zone out. But I will say this, it's also a time I'll often be out on a run or a bike ride or even a swim, and I will remember something that I forgot to do, or I will think up an idea. So I'll think, oh, I really need to do that. And actually, that happens frequently. I didn't used to run with my phone, but now I have all my music on my phone. So I kind of sometimes I have my phone on me. And when I have an idea, I write it down. So I slow down, I stop, I write down my idea, send it to myself, and then continue to go. So I think it's not just, it's kind of shutting off your mind from all the things that are going on around you and helping you make decisions. So for me, it's creativity and it's also decision making that happens. I mean, it's not every day. I mean, I don't want to sound like I'm coming up with all these amazing ideas. Otherwise, yeah, things would be different. But generally I can solve a problem or think of something that I haven't thought about while I'm exercising.
I love the voice memos in my phone, and I know if I'm on a long bike ride, for example, and I come up with something dumb or something brilliant, and it's good enough that I need to stop my bike and find my phone and dictate it into the phone before getting back on the bike. It's like, this is something I should remember because it's causing me to stop my run or stop my bike.
It absolutely is. To me, it's like your mind sort of slows down and some part of it completely shuts down, at least for me. And like, for example, when I'm training really hard, I do a lot of CrossFit as well. And in CrossFit, they often say, okay, you got to do 30% of your one rep max on a bench press or something, right? And I'm sitting there trying to do the math. It's pretty simple math, but I can't, for whatever reason, you're training, your energy, you're moving. You can't seem to do this. So there's certain things that are easy to do, and certain things that are not so easy to do. So yeah, I think the focus that you have when you're training, when you're doing long term training, I think this is what we all enjoy. I think this is the part that we all love, and it seems to be whatever we call meditation, whatever you want to call it, it seems to be like that, at least like that for me. So,
And me as well. And it goes back to the point you made earlier about feeling like a winner, right? It's
mm.
the adrenaline, it's all this energy is being sort of bottled into whatever activity that you're doing at the moment. So, Naomi, I'm curious, how did it go from running at 11 years old to Ironman to CrossFit? Like, give us your story of this journey.
Yeah, so it's certainly not linear. It didn't sort of grow from one thing to the other. But yeah, I started running pretty early. I did a lot of cross country running. I was one of these kids at school where I just loved to do all the sports. I never won any of them, and I was never the winner. I never came first. Okay? I don't even think I came second or third, to be fair. But I just loved it all. Right, I wanted to do it all. So tennis, I wanted to learn that and everything else. I also started scuba diving pretty young, which I love and enjoy. And that's a whole different type of strength and sort of energy that you need for that. But then when I was in my sort of 20s, I went to college, and I think this is the same for a lot of people. You just for a lot of people, you either excel in sports in college, so you go into a team or you do something like that, or people just sort of drop things because the team sports aren't available, and people are kind of a little bit lost. They have not been in a gym, they don't know what to do in a gym, and so I was sort of in that spot where I didn't wasn't quite sure. I started doing more long distance running because I enjoyed that. And then one day, there's a girl that I work with in the company. She had just joined our company, and she said, "Oh, I do triathlons." And I said, "I've always wanted to do that, but I don't have a nice bike." And that was my excuse, that I needed a nice bike. And she said, "You don't need a nice bike." She said, "There are people doing it with, there's like a basket on the front, right?" I said, "Is that true?" She said, "Yeah." So I thought, what? Okay, fine. I'm going to do this. So I bought a secondhand bike, which someone later told me in a bike shop. It was called the Frankenstein bike because it was all different pieces of different bikes put together. what I didn't realize is I bought this in New York City. I thought it was the best investment I'd ever made. Um, and I rode this bike for maybe about a year or two, and then I upgraded and I did get the nice bike. But at first I was just riding any old bike. So again, my advice here would be don't hold yourself back because you think you can't, something is missing somewhere, and that you need
Mm,
it. And she had a very good point, which was, people are doing it on, grocery store kind of bikes, right? You don't need to have a fancy bike to do it. Although I do have learned later on, that when I come out of the swim, if I'm ahead of a group of people, they usually catch up to me on the bike because their bikes are a lot nicer than mine. So actually, I was right. You do need a good bike to do a good triathlon time. Um, but I think that later on, so I would do a lot of these. Then I got into triathlons, and then here's a quick story for you on why I entered into Ironman, and I'd love to hear yours as well. But I was at an event. It was actually run by a gentleman who works for a search firm, and it just got a bunch of executive athletes together in a room, and I was in that event, and a woman came up to me, and we were chatting, and she said she'd done 7 Ironman, and I was like, "Oh wow, I didn't even know people could do more than one." Right? I didn't understand this concept. But anyway, she didn't seem like a super athlete. She said she'd never been really an athlete. She just loved Ironman. And she said to me, she said, "There's only one thing that's holding you back from doing Ironman." And I was like, "Oh no, I've got to get a new bike." And she's like, "Nope." She said, "It's time. If you have
mm.
time to train for Ironman, you can do it." So I thought about it and I thought, you know what? If I can make time. So I did make the time and I did Ironman, and then I did another one about 11 months later, which actually is a good thing. I recommend people don't leave it 3 or 4 years and then do another one. You just have to start all over again. So just keep going. And I know you did this recently. So,
Yeah.
um, so that was my kind of into Ironman, and then I started doing some long distance swimming. I did the Catalina Island swim in a relay, so that was on a boat in relay, an hour in, an hour, 4 or 5 hours out, and then back in again. That was pretty crazy. And then just I do a number of different events every now and again. This weekend I did the Chicago River swim, which was actually in the lake. They moved it. But that was a 2-mile swim. So, I just jump back in here and there now, because I'm getting more busy running my business. But there's always time. You can always make time for this. So yeah. So that's my Ironman story. I don't know if you have an interesting Ironman story, but that's more.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I originally dabbled into this because of my wife. So she started doing Ironman about, I don't know, 4 years before I got into it, but it got me back in the pool, which then led into some long distance swims.
Nice.
And then I was a spectator at 3 of her events, and I'm like, "This is tiring being a spectator." It's like, "Why don't I go and line up with her?" And so, in 2014, we did Ironman Lake Placid together, and then did another 6 together, and now she's on a running kick, and I'm still on the triathlon kick. But it was all because, like, if I'm gonna be supportive, I might as well be at the starting line as well. And so it's created this habit. And to your point about time management, I find that I'm most efficient at managing my time when I've got a full calendar of training that has to get done,
Mhm.
or I'm going to have a bad race day. And so,
That's right.
you prioritize what's important to you, and you find the early mornings, or you get the long rides in on the weekends. And
Yeah, that's right. We actually did the same Ironman. We discovered we'd done the same race at the same time when it rained. It was probably the worst year for rain in Lake Placid. But uh, but yeah, no, these things I think are important. At least they're important for me. Again, I'm not winning. I'm not even coming in close in my age group. It's not really about that. But I will do a little shout out to a new event. I would say it's newer, and it's called High Rocks, and the spectator part of it is phenomenal. So High Rocks is 10. It's 8 or 7 sort of challenges that you have to do, like farmer carries, on a bike, etc. And in and out of them, you run 1 kilometer.
mm,
And so it's running and weightlifting and running and weightlifting, in and out, in and out. And it's excellent because it's indoors. So if you have spectators and friends who want to come and watch, they can. I mean, that's one of the downsides of Ironman. I resented asking people to come, help me or watch, because that's a whole day of just, wandering around, and then they see you run by in, 20 seconds. That's what they see. So, I don't get a lot of people coming out anymore to watch me do anything. So that's nice that you have your wife and you have each other to kind of do it together and you understand that world. Because I think for people who don't understand it, I mean, yeah, it can be really boring. So,
Yeah. We used to bring our parents to these races, and luckily we had them there because they could watch the kids and the rest of it. But it's the spectating side of the sport is as difficult, in my opinion, than the competing.
it is.
Naomi, you mentioned something about when you got into triathlon and your friends suggested the bike, and then you said, don't hold back because something's missing. How has that also shown up in your business life? Not holding back because you think something's missing.
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, we want perfection, right? We want it to be perfect, and so we hold off on things, or we hold back on doing things. Whether it's, oh, I don't have a good enough website, right? So I'm not going to announce my business. And actually, that's something that I'm going to say I'm doing right now. But I am working on a new website, so that is coming out. But I think for a lot of people, they're waiting for something big to happen or something to be perfect in order for them to move ahead. And of course, there are people that may see it. They may make an assumption about somebody based on something. But I think generally people, if they know you and they like you and they trust you, these little things really don't matter. I work with a lot of people who want to join corporate boards. And most of my clients have never served on a corporate board. There are some who have and who want to get onto bigger boards. But for a lot of people, it's going to be their first paid board position. And I mentor and advise them through that process. And for so many people, they put this off and put this off because they have a laundry list of things about why they are not suitable for boards, right? Well, I've never been a CEO. I've never run my own business. I've never been on a board before. Well, how can you get on a board if you haven't been on a board, right? So there's like a catch-22. So I hear it from my clients too. They sort of have excuses as to why they're not going to try and go after a challenge. And I think there's a couple of things going on there. I think it's a fear of failure. I think it's a fear of embarrassment. And sure, none of us want that. And especially when we've got to a point in our careers and also our athletic lives, right? Or careers, whatever you want to call them. I'm sure it's career for some people, not necessarily me, but in their athletic lives, they don't want to now go out and do something where they may fail. And I think that's what's holding people back. And when I ask people, especially people who, they don't want to run a marathon or they don't want to do a triathlon, right? For a lot of people, I think the mindset and the myth is that, somehow they're going to be crawling across the finish line, right? Or just 10 miles away from the finish line and kind of collapsing. And this is just not accurate at all. I've seen people walk most of the marathon in an Ironman. I've seen people leisurely biking in an Ironman. You don't have to go at top speed. And so when you break it down, and that was the same for me actually, when I met that woman who said, I've done 7 Ironman, you just need time. I thought I had to be a super athlete because that's what I'd seen on the TV. But what you don't see on the TV are all the regular people at the back, right? Because the people at the front, they are super athletes and they do an Ironman in sort of 9-10 hours, and I mean that's unheard of for regular people like me. So I'm not worried about that anymore. But I think you have to train yourself to stop thinking that way. You almost have to talk yourself out of it. But certainly I see that across my client base. I see that in myself. And I think we all see it a little bit. So
You know, yesterday I was talking to a pro triathlete, retired, and he was talking about in Kona coming down King. I'm gonna mess up the name, but anyway, going 60 miles an hour on his bike.
That steep
And I
hill.
said,
Yeah.
right, I've never seen that number on my bike, nor will I ever. Like, I barely see a 3 when I'm going on a very steep decline. Um, Naomi, I'd love to dig in a little bit deeper on the corporate board, but from the perspective of responsibility. I think there's a lot of persona out there that it's just fun and games, and you show up and you get a check and you go out for fine dining, and you're like, it's all that glory. But the reality is there's a real responsibility in that role. And I'd love to hear you talk about sort of like relating it back to Ironman. People that watch us see us finish and they see all this glory, but they don't see the hard work that we put into it day in and day out. I would love to hear you talk about that with respect to board responsibility.
Yeah. So board members of corporations are generally going to have around 25, 30 plus years of experience, right? So first of all, they've seen and done a lot of things. Board members are chosen for different reasons. So some of them may have a strong M&A background because the company they're going to be on the board of is also involved in a lot of M&A. They may have a lot of relationships in a particular industry. They may be a scientific person, right? Someone with sort of deep knowledge of a particular science that they need on their board. And I think that that's why boards are valuable, because you bring in experts from the field.
Mm.
And so, yeah, to your point, I think it's another myth, right? It's like the myth of the Ironman. You have to be a super athlete with a $10,000 bike, right? And have to be this amazing swimmer. Oh, side note, I've met so many people in their 40s and 50s. If anyone's listening and they don't know how to swim, 40s and 50s who learned how to swim and did Ironman. So, you can turn it around. But no, back to what I was saying, I think that, when you think about how the experience, it really does matter and it is important. But there's also a myth attached to it that, board directors are there to be figureheads. And that may be true at times. That may be true for certain types of companies and certain types of boards. And I think it's a little outdated. I think it's probably a little old, but you'll always find someone on a board where someone says, "Oh, I don't know how is that person even here?" Right. But I think most of the time where I see board members being hired and brought onto boards is because they have such a phenomenal track record. They are strategic thinkers. And when they look at a business, so just by looking at a P&L, especially some of these CFOs, they can look at your financial statement and they can immediately identify some opportunities for you to grow as a business or for you to transform in some way. And, they're risk mitigators. And those are the three things that boards care about: growth, transformation, risk. And so if you have those three things, it qualifies you really to be an effective board director. The other thing I would say is, just like working on a triathlon, really a career, but if you're going into triathlons, you just start with a sprint, right? You wouldn't start with the Ironman. I don't know anyone who started with the Ironman. So you would start with a sprint or an Olympic or something like that, which is a shorter distance. That's how I work with my clients too. If you have a really big goal of being on the board of Walmart, that's great. But where are we going to start today so that you can be on the board of Walmart in 10 or 20 years time, right? And so it's all about planning out your career, starting small, working your way up, and then eventually getting to the end goal, which might be finishing the Ironman or getting onto that very large corporate board. But corporate boards are a great option for people who are retiring. They want an alternative avenue. They want an alternative career. And they also they want purpose. They want to give back. I work with people who are retired and also not retired, people who are in their executive positions and actually doing really, really well. So it's kind of like a combination of both. But yeah, I would say those are the similarities. It's very much you've got to plan it out. You've got to make sure you're positioned correctly for the board. You've got to make sure you've planned, right? You've got all your equipment. You've got your, you've got all your things. I did Ironman in Lake Placid, and I have the wings on my thing. Wings are where you put your water bottles. Empty, totally empty. Just got on the bike, started going, and I went, all my water. And of course, it's not just water in there. You've got your this, that concoction, whatever. So that was left behind. So, that was just bad on my part, right? I didn't organize myself properly. So, being prepared for board meetings is kind of the same thing, right? And I actually teach that with my clients too, which is getting onto the board. I help them get to a position where they feel confident to actually apply and pursue board opportunities. But then when you get to the board, it's not an easy ride at all. There's a lot of preparation. There's a lot of, and you have to perform, right? Otherwise, you'll be, you won't be on that many boards in the future. So I don't know if that's the same with any kind of Ironman, but I think if well, I suppose if you don't finish, but you still apply again. But there was only one time that I didn't finish. And that was when I got a flat on a bike. That was just a regular Olympic, I think. And then I just took my shoes off and I ran to the start. It was like a mile. Running with no shoes on is actually really painful, and I got really sore calves, so I don't recommend it.
No, and it's amazing how many of those stories we've got tucked away or we've forgotten over the years. Naomi, if I understand correctly, you also work with boards directly on their effectiveness and their structure.
Mhm.
Can you talk to a little bit about that? We've got audience members who are entrepreneurs. Talk to us a little bit about that work that you're doing.
Yeah, so I connect a lot of companies with people that I think might be a good fit. And also when my clients are working with me, if I think that there's somebody that they should speak to, I'm always happy to make that connection. I don't do recruiting or anything of that kind, but I do like to make connections between people that are in industry or who are part of the same ecosystem, right? When it comes to business. When it comes to the boards themselves, I've worked alongside a lot of companies and a lot of entrepreneurs who are trying to think through the next 5 to 10 years. And sometimes you have to actually just think in the next 6 to 12 months, right? And you need to decide who is going to be a good fit for me on my board. And in some cases, when companies are sort of first starting out, it's an advisory board, right? It's not even a fiduciary board yet. You don't need that. But do you need some people that are going to look good on your investor deck, right? Do you need some people who are going to be active and make introductions for you? And so it's really important to have a good variety of people, but to change that continually as your company grows. So, there's a lot of talk of, having term limits, right, for board directors, and there are term limits generally, but for some companies it doesn't really exist, and in some cases it works well. But it's also important to bring that next generation of boardroom leaders into boards and to bring people in and out. And so some of the things that I work on with boards as well is to kind of figure out who needs to stay and who do they need to replace them with. When there are big sort of crises happening, like the sort of global pandemic was a great example. I got a lot of calls from companies saying, we're not quite sure what to do and we don't know who to bring onto our board. And some board members were saying, I don't think I can help you through this crisis. I'm out. So they were leaving. And so there was a lot of movement of board directors during that time, especially at private companies. And so we would really just look at who are the right people to serve on those boards. And I'll do a shout out to a lot of military veterans. I'm going to be writing an article about them for the November Veterans Day. But they were especially needed at the board level, and even they were brought in as advisors to kind of help manage that crisis and to help be more strategic about the plan. And so boards look for different personalities and different characteristics and different skill sets at different times, depending on what is happening to them. So it's not a one size fits all. It's certainly when I work with companies, I work with them one-on-one to really just understand where they're going, and then who might be the right fit. But I will say this is every single time companies say they are most interested in looking for fit, culture fit, right? And what that means is that it's somebody who can collaborate with them. It's somebody who can disagree agreeably, right? And somebody who is going to bring the right amount of knowledge and expertise, but a person that can deliver it in the right way. And so I tend to find the characteristics, the personalities of board directors tend to be very similar. They're calm under pressure. They're humble. They don't have anything to prove at this point. But they're very tuned in to business and how businesses are run. And they bring just phenomenal ideas, and they're lifelong learners too, right? They always want to learn. They always want to get better. They're not there just for the paycheck. And actually being on a board isn't going to change one board isn't going to change your whole life, right? It's not going to, your wallet is not going to increase in size in any way, shape, or form. But it's you're getting paid, to help be a strategic leader and a strategic guide for the CEO and the shareholders and the stakeholders.
That's super helpful. So when you're having that conversation about board changes, makeup, structure, is that a conversation with the CEO or the management team, or is that a conversation with the board chair? And many times it's the same person, but I'm curious, is it the CEO coming to you and saying, Naomi, I got to change my board? Or is it the board saying, hey, we got to reshuffle the deck here?
Most of the time, it's the CEO. Most of the time, it's the CEO because they're seeing everything. They're having conversations with all the board members, and often, you know, at board meetings, the CEO would possibly present a strategy or present an idea to the board, and then the board would, give their thoughts and ideas and recommendations, and it's all recommendation, right? Like it's a vote. The CEO doesn't have to do anything that they tell them to do, but it's certainly if they feel like things are going in the wrong direction, then they will definitely step in. But it's definitely the CEO. Sometimes it's a combination of the CEO and the CFO who see that they may have a strategy and a plan, but the board are possibly, pushing them to go in a different direction. Now, in some cases, the CEO and the CFO and other executives do have a lot of influence to make decisions about this kind of thing. And, it depends on the company. Private versus public will be a little different. But for example, if it's a family owned business and you're the only independent board member and everyone is the family and you disagree, your days might be numbered at that firm. So I think the dynamics, they call it board dynamics, which basically is a nice way of saying, all the issues that you you come across when people are working together. But yeah, the dynamics on a board can affect, who makes the decision at that level. And so it is quite different. And I'll give you another example. VC backed firm, you're pretty much going to have all the VC people sitting on the board. There's no one else. So again, that's going to be a very heavy weighted group who are working with the CEO. So again, as a CEO, you'd hope that those are good people that you could work with. But if you want to change the board, that's a little difficult. So
Years ago, it reminded me of a story. Years ago, I was sitting on a volunteer board, and I was a volunteer on a board, and we'd have a board meeting, and we're talking about, a new building being built for this organization, and we're having a good conversation around it. And then one of the board members would say, "Oh, I'll just pay for it," and then the decision's made. So there was never really any conversation or decision making. If somebody had a new idea and was willing to pay for it, it just happened. So anyway, you brought that memory up by your story.
no, it's true. I mean, the community nonprofit boards, and I'll just say a little piece about nonprofit boards because I, on the one hand, They're great experience for people to get. I think they're really important. I think we should all do our piece for the community in some way, shape, or form, and volunteer our time and serve on a nonprofit board. The experience doesn't necessarily lead to a corporate board. So it's not like well, you do your nonprofit board and then you become a corporate board member. It's not like that. So it's a whole different beast. But I do speak to a lot of younger people, and I say younger people in their 20s and 30s and 40s who are looking to build their executive career and want to find an avenue to actually sort of do something else. And so for a lot of them, I recommend industry associations, professional associations. So if you're part of your marketing, you might want to join the American Marketing Association or something like that, right? What it does is it helps you to build your brand, number one. Number two, you might get some speaking opportunities, right? Because you're a board member of the AMA, and you're also the chief marketing officer or marketing director of XYZ firm. So it kind of helps you. It elevates your brand, and also you're sitting around a boardroom table with other great marketers, right? What more could that? How much better could that be, right? When it comes to learning and understanding what's going on. So nonprofit boards are really, really important. But to your point, money talks, and if something has to get done, these organizations rely exclusively on sponsorships, fundraising, donations from their board, from corporations, from their members, whatever it might be. And so, so in many cases, if something needs to get done and somebody can pay for it, it usually gets done. So,
yeah. Changing topics a little bit, could you educate the audience on her C-suite and what work you're doing there?
Yeah, so her C-suite is a national membership organization of C-suite women or aspiring C-suite women. And most recently, I've been working with them for a couple of years now, running their board program. And so they have a board circle. And this is a group of members who are dedicated to either being on boards, they are on boards, or they are aspiring to be on boards. And every month, we talk about board level topics, we answer questions, we help people feel more confident and ready. And then more recently, I've been running board readiness retreats with her C-suite. So this is a very exclusive cohort of around 10 C-suite executives who have decided again that they would like to fast track and become board ready in a very short space of time. So we go away to a nice hotel and spa for 3 days, and we do a lot of training and board readiness. We have their professional headshots taken. We do all kinds of workshops and things like that with them. And by the end of the 3 days, all of them, if not already, have started to make outreach to people in their network to start talking to them about their desire to get on a corporate board. And actually, this is something that I teach a lot with people and I work on with my clients, which is if people don't know that you want to achieve something big, they can't help you. And so, again, let's tie this back. Let's tie this back to our athlete. I went to this event and I asked this girl, hey, you've done Ironman, how did you do it? Right. Because I would like to do it, but I don't think I can. And so she helped me to see that actually it was something that was achievable. But if I hadn't even bothered to go to that event, I may never have done it. And so the fact that you get out there and you talk to people and you have it in your mind and you say, I would really like to do this. The minute that you say that and you tell people, that's when things start to happen, because now somebody opens a door, says, oh, I can help you. I'll help you with your training. Or if you say, I'm looking for a corporate board seat, you might say to me, well, that's interesting. I just had a call with Naomi and she knows about a board role that is available at a startup and they are looking for someone, she said, just like you. So it's about getting the message out there and helping people to help you, right? But if they don't know what you want and they don't know where you're going, they can't help you. So putting that note out, I think, in messaging out is critical.
That's a great point. Naomi, if an audience member wants to get in touch with you or learn more about her C-suite, what are the best social media platforms to get connected?
Absolutely. Yeah. LinkedIn is probably the best one for me. I mean, you can just find me. I think if you search for Naomi Kent, a C suite, or Naomi Kent, boardroomcompany.com, you'll be able to find me. But I appreciate that, Greg. Thank you.
Absolutely. And we'll include those in our show notes. Naomi, I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think we hit the nail on the head at the end when we started to talk about if you want to achieve something big, you need to let people know so they can help, right? This is a community. We cross the finish line by ourselves, but we're usually falling into the arms of somebody else who's helped us along the way. And so there's a lot of learning there. So to my audience, our audience members, if you got some value out of the show, please like the show, please subscribe, please follow Naomi. We'll have all her links in our show notes for you to keep track of what she's up to. Um, I love starting our conversation today around morning routine and how impactful that is of getting that first win sort of under the belt before the sun comes up. And the next time I am in Chicago, I will make sure to see that sunrise across the lake. Naomi, it's been great having you on the show. I really enjoyed your insights.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. It was great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Chief Endurance Officer podcast. To hear more inspiring stories and strategies around the endurance mindset, be sure to subscribe below or visit us at chiefenduranceofficer.com. Until next time, keep pushing those limits